Hello and welcome back to our series of educational videos for Northern Virginia homeowners on repair, remodeling, and maintenance for your Northern Virginia home. My name is Frank Felker, and I'm joined again today by the owner of Orion Home Improvements, Jeremiah Davies. How are you today, Jeremiah?
It's a fantastic day, Frank, and really happy to be here with you.
It is a beautiful day after days and days of rain. I'm going to ask you to turn down the volume on your speakers just a little bit. My boisterous voice is coming out of them and coming back to me. So I'm sure our audience would like to only hear from me once each time I speak. So I want to get into this. Today we're going to be talking about replacing the roof on your Northern Virginia home. And this is a issue near and dear to my heart. I've been involved with a couple of homes that had the roofs replaced. The first one occurred early in my marriage. My then wife and I were living in a rental home that needed a roof replaced and went through that drill, and then also had a roof of a home that I owned replaced. And so I know it's quite an involved process. There's a lot of expense involved. There's a lot of different variables and questions that one needs to address in order to get the best value and choose the right contractor. So let's start kind of seemingly obvious question. How do we know when we need a new roof? I mean, roofs last a long time, and it might just be a little leak here or there. It might be this or that. How do we know when we should either repair or it's time to replace the roof on our home?
Well, Frank, that comes down to really getting a good inspection on the roof and kind of seeing where it's at in its life cycle. When we talk about most roofing systems, they have kind of what's called an S-curve on their life. And so what that means is once the material comes out of the factory and gets installed on your roof, it actually ages very rapidly for the first, say, 6 months to a year. And then it kind of levels off and it goes through a long, slow aging process until it gets towards the end of its life, and then it has a sharp drop off. And so that's why we call it the S-curve of the roof life. And what we do and we recommend to our customers is really with the service or the repairs that are needed, what is the cost of that versus how much time we're expecting to get out of the rest of the roof system. And so it just comes down to money is, does it make sense to spend the money on the repair now and then spend money on the replacement in a very short time, or just get it off your plate and kind of take that worry off your list. Lots of things go into finding out what are the causes of the roof, but that's really how we determine the repair versus replace. It comes down to budgets and making sure my customers are spending their money on the right things at the right time.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's it sounds a lot like repairing an automobile. Does it make sense to just keep repairing it, or is it time to get a new car? So I can see where that is the decision that's facing one. When you say get an inspection made, who is it that we should ask to have come inspect our roof?
Well, obviously, it doesn't quite make sense to say, why don't we hire the person who's going to sell us a new roof to come out and inspect us and tell us if we need a new roof? And so that really goes down to kind of researching the companies you're going to talk to and make sure that they're operating on a pretty high level of integrity. And there's so many different places on the web that you can go and take a look at folks now without them even, knowing that you're looking at them to get a good feel of what a company's like. So with that being off to the side, you do want someone who really knows what's going on with the roof, whether it's natural roof like slate or wood shakes. They age and have different signs of problems in need of replacements differently than, let's say, a metal roof or even an asphalt shingle roof. So once you get a trained professional who's been around roofing enough times to know when something's going to last, that's who you want to look for. And so I would definitely recommend having a roofing company do that inspection outside of somebody else, even modern day insurance adjusters and appraisers. While they feel great with their feet on the ground, once they get up on the roof, they're really not interested in being up there too long and doing a great inspection. So
I would be like them. I'm not interested in spending too much time at the top of a ladder. So I hear what you're saying. Find somebody who both knows what they're talking about, knows what they're seeing when they're looking at it, and is somebody that you can trust. Have them take a look at it, get their opinion from them. That's good advice. Recently here in our area here in Northern Virginia, we had a hailstorm come through, Jeremiah, and it affected some neighborhoods more severely than other neighborhoods. And certainly hail can cause a great deal of damage. How do we know after a hailstorm comes through whether or not there is damage, number one, and if so, whether it warrants repair or replacement. Is there anything specific relative to hail that we should be looking for?
Absolutely. Hailstorms happen all the time, and even in our area, we do have smaller cluster hailstorms that drop the ice on us in smaller regions. The storm you're talking about kind of came in with a couple mile wide swath that went for 5-6 miles, and just really when you have as much building and urban development as we have here, it affects a lot of homeowners, and that's why it's such a big impact. But the big thing about hail is anything that is going to be about the size of a golf ball or larger is going to cause damage to your roof. Depending on how the wind is blowing, it may cause damage to the siding and to the other metals on the house. But with the roof in particular, since that's the subject we're talking on, a couple of things that happen that cause the hail to damage a roof are if it strikes and obviously dents or damages the material, then you have a problem. With asphalt shingles in particular, if it knocks off the granules that are on top, and if you can imagine, 24 golf balls slamming into your roof surface at 60, 70 miles an hour, it can do quite an impact. But it knocks the granules off, and those granules actually protect the asphalt underneath from the harmful effects of the UV rays. So what happens is the sun's rays get to the asphalt, it dries it out, all the oils start to leach out, and your shingles will fail sooner. So it's not a matter of, with smaller hail, golf ball size to say, small tennis ball size. That stuff may not cause immediate leaks and immediate damage to your home, but 2, 3, 4 years from now, you could end up with catastrophic roof failure where you have all these impacts that start to leak and cause problems later on. And so it takes a trained eye to really see if the granules are knocked off, if the fiberglass mat is damaged, or really get to the bottom of the damage. And if it is damaged, then your homeowner's insurance policy usually helps to cover the cost of getting that replaced. And that's really what insurance is for, is to help with the big damage stuff and not the small little things. So.
And with that in mind, with the help from the insurance company, and we're paying our premiums, so it's we might as well make a claim when we have a legitimate claim to make. Would you recommend, after a hailstorm came through, to have somebody come take a look at it? Because would it be true to say that if you were to try to make a hail claim at a later date, your insurance company might be less likely to pay on that?
Well, it does help to kind of have the inspection and file the claim at the time when the storm is there. The insurance companies, obviously, they don't want to pay out. They want to pay as little as possible for the damages and still protect their risk and their liability, which is your home. So what they'll do is, if there's a year past, 2 years past, it depends on your individual policy, what your statute of limitations are to file a claim. But a few things are going to be very important. You have to know the exact date of the storm that caused the loss. If you don't know and don't remember the exact date of the storm, then they can deny it based on that claim. Even if there's damage up there, if you don't know when it happened, they can write it off as a no-go for you. And secondly, during a hailstorm that has a major impact to an area like ours, it's going to bring quite a few people in that wouldn't normally be working in the area, out-of-towners, even out-of-staters, that this is what they do, is hail damage insurance restoration work. Now, some of these folks, fantastic companies, great morals, they've come in and leave a positive impact on an area to help customers get through this time. But there's just as many that are simply in there for making the quickest, fastest dollar and don't care about the customers that are away. If you live in an area like this, I'm sure you've had plenty of folks knock on your doors right after a hailstorm, really just trying to turn up that money and turn up the profit.
I can see that that'd be something we need to be careful about. Let's move on to another type of potential weather damage, which occurs not in the spring and summer, but in the wintertime, with heavy snowfall and ice building up at the edges of the roof, ice dams. Can you tell us what an ice dam is, what kind of damage it can create, and potentially something we could do to help ameliorate that or prevent it?
Sure. An ice dam, in its most simple terms, is where water or snow gets on the roof and the heat from inside the home melts the bottom layer of the snow. And so that water runs down underneath the snow, between the snow and the roof, and once it gets out to exposed air down near your gutter lines, it refreezes. And so as it refreezes, it basically creates a dam. And if you can imagine kind of creating a 6 inch, 7 inch thick block of ice down at your gutter lines, you're not going to allow the water that's currently melting up near the top to go anywhere. So you end up creating basically a little lake on your roof. And that can actually start to go back up underneath your shingles or your roofing materials and start pouring inside of your house. There's not a whole lot that can be done to prevent an ice dam per se, but there are several things that can be done to prevent the effects of the ice dam from coming into the house. And one of those is really, it doesn't even have to do with the roof, it's maintaining your gutter system. If your gutter system has any type of clog in there and you have meltwater that can't leave the gutter system and you have a little bit of water that stays in there, that's just going to build up. So first and foremost, making sure your gutters are clean and draining properly is key. From there, what we want to do is we want to obviously make sure that we have good waterproofing underlayments that go underneath your shingles. It's the details that you don't see that really make the big difference. The leak barriers or ice and water shields are specifically designed to go underneath the areas where ice dams are most prevalent, so that if water does get underneath the shingles, it actually doesn't mitigate inside the house. And finally, the last thing, and probably the most important thing, is proper ventilation. In the wintertime, what we really want to achieve is a bit of a balance from outside temperatures and temperatures inside your attic, so that we can kind of control how fast the snow melts on your roof. If it melts too fast, you end up with a bigger probability for an ice dam. But if you kind of control how fast it melts, how fast it goes down the stuff, then you probably alleviate the problem of building up that heavy water flow on those situations. Just keeping a good flow of moderate air inside that attic.
That's great information, Jeremiah. I learned a lot from you right there. Now, we've talked in the past, in fact, one of our videos that we did was entirely focused on the contractor selection process. So I don't want us to go into too much more detail on that topic, but I would imagine that there are specific aspects of choosing a roofing contractor that you could help us keep in mind to do a better job. What sort of things should we look for when speaking to someone about replacing our roof?
Well, when it comes to replacing your roof, there's a few items that you really want to make sure that you're taking care of as a consumer to protect yourself. First and foremost is obviously doing your research, making sure that you're talking with a company that has a decent reputation in the area. Once you get that over, whether it's talking with your friends and family, referrals from around your network, or just doing those online research we talked about earlier, you'll narrow down your search. Once you're actually speaking with the roofing contractor, there's a few things that you want to make sure that they do. Make sure that roofing contractor, before they're giving you their estimate and before you're moving forward, have them inspect the attic. What does the underside of the roof look like? Is there mold problems? Are there ventilation issues? Is there wood rot that can be seen from the inside of the attic that doesn't sneak up on you and turn into extra costs after you sign the bottom line of the contract? Secondly is make sure that the roofing contractor is getting up on the roof. I know plenty of folks that all they do is they focus on making a hard sell, and they go out, they take a quick peek from the ground, a quick measurement, and then they're pushing a product that serves the company's needs, not the consumer's needs. So as a consumer, make sure that your contractor is getting up and taking a good look at what they're providing you as an estimate. And I would say the very last thing is ensure that your contract document you have with the contractor is not overly lopsided in favor of the contractor. Make sure there's protections as far as specifics of what materials are going to be used, specifics on quantities. If there's pre-existing damage on the home, whether that's a garage door or, just walk around the house with the contractor and make sure you know what is there damage-wise before they show up, because the last thing you want to do is have a dent on your garage door and not really know if it was the contractor that made that or if it was there before the contractor showed up. So those are just some key tips and tricks to make sure that everything goes smooth on the contractor selection portion.
That's great. Thanks very much for that. You touched on something right there that I wanted to bring up as my next question, which is there are a variety of different types of roofing materials that we can choose from, and even subsets within them, like asphalt shingles that have different guarantees, number of years of warranty life, and that type of thing. What are the different options we're looking at, Jeremiah, as far as replacing our current roof with something new, different materials that we might want to consider?
Sure thing. There's a few different standards in roofing. If you have a pitched roof or a roof that has a sloped side, what you're going to look at is probably your naturals, which are going to be your slates and your wood shakes. Once you get past the naturals, then you get into your synthetic slates. You can have metal standing seam roofs, metal shingles, and then by far the most common and most popular roofing material for steep slope applications are going to be your asphalt shingles. As a matter of fact, if we take a look behind me, we can see one of these options on my side here is called a Grand Canyon. It's a heavy-duty asphalt shingle, and basically what they do is take layers of asphalt and layers of fiberglass mat, run them together, and then put a nice colored and protective ceramic-coated granule on top. If you look at the other side here, we can take a look and see some synthetic slates. These are a rubberized and plastic material that's made to look like a natural slate material. Both these products behind me both come with 50-year warranties. It's kind of the type of roof that you put on you don't have to worry about. They're up on the top end of the budget, but there are some other options at the lower end of the budget that can get 20 to 25 years of great use as long as a full system is going. And I'm not talking about just the shingles on top, but getting protective edge metals and the underlayments, the proper flashing details, all the stuff that goes in to make sure that the water stays where it's supposed to, which is on the outside of the home.
That's great. I imagine we could spend all day talking about all the different options available with that, but I appreciate you giving us a broad swath there and giving us the understanding that there's a lot of different things to look at, a lot of different things to consider, and I imagine that's the type of thing you'd like for us to talk to the contractor about when we bring them in our home.
Absolutely. And when it comes to roofing and with all the different options, the biggest thing is understanding what your biggest goals are with it. If it's just a price issue and you're looking to get your home protected for best price, then there's one option for that. If you're looking at energy savings, you live in an area where the sun's just beating on your house all day long, there's different types of roofing options that can help keep your house cooler. If you live in an area where you have high winds, there's roofing options that can help you with beating the high winds and not having to blow off your house. So it really just comes down to finding a contractor that understands what your needs are, and then you getting a better grasp of how those needs can benefit you as a consumer.
That's great. So often the answer that you give to the question is make sure you're talking to the right contractor, somebody you can trust, somebody who knows what they're talking about. And and that brings me to my next question. As I mentioned, I was involved or lived in a couple of homes while they had their roofs replaced. And the one that I owned, the contractor came to me in the midst of the project and said, oh, we're going to have to replace 17 sheets of plywood that are rotted or damaged or what have you. And this was after, of course, I've been given a price and in the middle of the project where my house is torn half apart. How can we avoid something like that? You mentioned earlier you'd like for the contractor to go up in the attic and take a look at the roof from the underside. I guess maybe the way I should best phrase this question, Jeremiah, is if the contractor does come to me with this problem, how do I know if they're being straight with me or not? How do I know that there truly is some problem with that plywood?
Okay, well, whether it's plywood or it's 1x6 plank boards or whatever the structural surface of the roof that the roofing materials need to be nailed to, it needs to hold up to basically three tests. Number one is it has to be able to hold a uniform load. And a uniform load is, like we were talking about earlier, a heavy snow load that it gets on the roof. It's got to be able to support that without buckling and cracking. The second thing that needs to do is it needs to be able to hold an impact load. And that's basically like someone walking on the roof. 250-pound man like myself gets up on the roof and starts stepping around. You can imagine a lot of pressure at one individual spot up there. So it needs to be able to hold that impact load as well as, say, a branch falling from the sky. The final thing is it needs to be able to hold the nails or the screws against wind uplift. If there is something wrong with the wood where it doesn't have enough grip to hold that nail and the wind comes along, all that roofing work is going to be in the front yard. So those are the three things that we need the wood to do. And again, there's plenty of hidden costs that can come up that are unseen things when a roof comes up. And unfortunately, we can't just lift up the roof, take a look at everything, put it back down, and give you the estimate on the front end. That's what we would ultimately like to do. And that's why we say get in the attic and take a good inspection from the top of the roof, from the end of the roof, and see everything before providing an estimate. But when it comes down to the actual sales process, sometimes an area will have roofing turn into a commodity, and it's the same thing with A or B talking about companies, but who can give me it for the best price? And sometimes someone will come in with that best price, it looks too good to be true, and then end up in your situation where you have 20 to 30 sheets of wood that need to be replaced at a ridiculous amount of money, and before you know it, you've spent more money with low-cost contractor A because of the hidden and unseen stuff than you would have with contractor B, who had that stuff kind of wrapped into their estimate. So it's just knowing it. And the biggest thing here is, again, if that plywood, it doesn't have the integrity to hold itself, or it looks like it's rotted out, they're probably not jiving you. And we do see it quite often in our area. It just, wood does deteriorate when it's being pelted with 120-degree attic temperatures for, say, 20 years in between roof replacements.
Which is a perfect segue into my next question, because so often the question of ventilation comes up. You mentioned it in passing earlier, and I was interested to learn how important ventilation is in the attic area and so forth. But what about if a roofing contractor is telling us that they think we should have a ridge vent installed at the time the new roof is installed, or some other type of attic ventilation? What can you tell us about active and passive, I guess is the way those two work, ventilation systems, and whether or not we should consider the additional expense?
That's a fantastic question, Frank, and we could probably have an entire segment built just on ventilation and how it affects a home. But the biggest principle about the ventilation is airflow and air movement. You want to have air coming into the attic space and air going out of the attic space. And so the best combination for that is going to be continuous soffit vents, which are down at the bottom of the roof, and continuous ridge vent at the top. And so what that's going to do is going to allow the air to move evenly from the inside all the way through the outside. Now, depending on the size of your attic space, there is a formulation that describes how much ventilation you have to have total and how much should be at the exhaust and how much should be at the intake. But what I want you to understand is, imagine a fire hose. And if you connect that fire hose to the fire hydrant, you will have the water at the intake from the fire hydrant moving through the hose and then coming out the other side, your intake and your exhaust. Now, if you have too many types of insulation or ventilation that don't work together, that's like poking a bunch of holes in that fire hose. You basically kind of destroy how that air is going to be, or that water is moving through the hose, and it's getting out in different places, not really functioning properly. On the same note, let's say that you have a fire hydrant size intake, but your exhaust is the size of a regular garden hose, you're really not going to get the same type of airflow flowing through. So when it comes to designing a ventilation system, while there's 5-6 different ways to get great ventilation for an attic system, what you want to do is make sure that your intake and your exhaust are balanced properly and that they're adequate enough for everything to move through your attic. Every home is different. Every home has a unique challenge as far as ventilation. So just making sure you're working with a contractor that doesn't say, you need a power vent and a ridge vent and a box vent, and let's just get all these vents up here. No, you really want to have him explain how that ventilation is going to work and how it's going to cool off your attic and keep it the way it's supposed to be as temperature goes.
That's great stuff. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Now, let's say that we have selected a contractor. We've determined what material we're going to use, what kind of vent system, ventilation we're going to put in. We're ready to move forward with it. How long does it take from the time we sign our contract to get started? And then once they start the project, how long does it take to complete?
That's a unique question for each individual contractor, each individual project. I can speak to how we've set ourselves up. Depending on the availability of the materials, if you order a special order material for your roof and it takes a while to come in, that could delay your project. But let's say that you sign a contract with the customer, all the colors are picked, all the materials are in stock. Most roofing projects, if they're staffed properly, can be done in a single day. Now, there are houses that are 4,000 square feet of roofing or larger that could be broken into a 2-day project. But that's how we staff our stuff. Now, on the flip side, I'm not sure if you're familiar with what a townhouse roof looks like, about 800 square feet of roofing. I've seen companies that dispatch a 1 or 2 man crew without the proper tools and proper training, and it can take them 3 days to do a roof that size. Whereas a company like us, we can come in 4 hours, have the roof off, on, and have cleanup going. So again, just going back to that contractor selection process, not only focusing on the materials and the price and kind of what's happening on the front end, but dig in and ask those questions about how production happens and how quickly that should go to give a better idea of who's going to be on your project. The cheapest project that takes 5 days to complete may not be as great as one that's done in 1 day for a little bit more money.
That's great. Time is money. And especially when people are crawling around on the roof of your house with hammers, that can seem like a very long time. And with that in mind, what, is the experience like? Should I leave the house? What's going to happen? And there's going to be people scraping off shingles. There's going to be people hammering. I mean, is it the kind of thing where we should schedule to just vacate the property and let you guys do what you need to do?
That's down to everyone's own opinion. Some people want to be home during the project to make sure they've got what they feel is kind of an eye on things that's just going on. If you have you have small children that are in the home, I would recommend that you get out and find an activity to do with them for a few hours. Your home turns into a construction site. There's trash and debris that's falling from up above. There's going to be generators and air compressors running, so it's going to be loud. The nail guns and people stomping around. It can make for one heck of an Excedrin headache day. But in the grand scheme of things, what we tell our customers is whether you're home or not, just make yourself available for a phone call should we find something that needs your attention on the home. This is your house, and if there's something we find that needs your attention, we want to be able to make sure that you understand what's going on there. So it's really a personal preference, but it's just managing the children, the animals that are around the property, and making sure that everyone stays safe while the construction's going on.
Great advice. One last thing. What level, I guess is the way to put it, of cleanup should we expect? There's lots of little roofing nails. There's lots of little bits of asphalt, and there's just a lot of trash, as you just mentioned, that gets generated. What should we expect our yard and our home to look like from a cleanup standpoint once the contractor has finished?
Well, my train of thought has always been this. I want to show up to a customer's home and then leave it looking better than when we arrived. It's got a brand new bright roof, and we have a good cleanup going on. I've seen contractors that are out there that just throw every bit of trash out on the ground all over the house, and then they go back after the fact and try to get stuff cleaned up. And like you said, there's nails and bits of debris and little cut pieces of aluminum for the flashing pieces all over. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel like putting a piece of sharp aluminum between my toes when I'm running around my yard in flip-flops this summer. So what I recommend is that a contractor shows up and that they put yard and landscape tarps down, cover bushes, cover all the areas where the trash is actually going to be hitting the ground. It makes cleanup so much easier after the fact. If it's a windy day, a crew should have folks out there grabbing stuff as it's blowing around so you don't have trash and debris ending up 3 houses over on the windy day. And finally, making sure that a nail magnet is run around to pick up any loose debris. One thing that helps with that, when you get your home ready for a project, just make sure you go through and do a little landscaping yourself. Mow the grass, pull the weeds out of the flower beds. Just make sure that there's not a lot of debris that the guys are going to have to go through and get stuff up. A shorter lawn makes it much easier to find and pick up stray nails so they don't end up in feet and tires.
That's great stuff. We've covered a lot of ground here, but we've run out of time. Is there anything you'd like to share with us that we haven't covered before we close?
Absolutely, and this is just a personal preference, but to anybody who's watching this video, I definitely recommend that should you start looking at needing to replace a roof, start to think about going to something that's going to last 40 or 50 years. And the reason being is once you get a great roof system on, the economy is going to start transitioning to home solar energy solutions. So within the decade, there's going to be a lot of incentives that come in here. If you replace your roof now with a roof that's going to be 50 years old, you're not going to have to worry about that expense if you do decide to convert and add some solar to your roof. Is that in the forecast for everyone? No, but that's my opinion, is put something that doesn't go in the landfill quite as soon as a better product.
Wonderful, wonderful closing thought there, Jeremiah. Well, Jeremiah Davies, I thank you so much for sharing your expertise again with us on this video about roofing.
Fantastic, Frank. As always, it's a pleasure, and can't wait to chat with you again.
Thank you again, and thank you for sitting in with us. We will be back with you soon with another of our educational videos for Northern Virginia homeowners. See you then.